Welcome back to another week's video, everyone. Thank you so much for your support on the channel so far. Really appreciate it. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about something that's quite important as a street photographer and as someone that is out and about taking photos of everyday life. In different styles of photography, everyone has different opinions on street photography as a genre. Some people think it's great and you can take photos of anything because you're in a public space. Others think it's completely immoral and you shouldn't do it at all. I slot somewhere in the middle. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, I have touched on this briefly in a previous video where I talked about street photography etiquette, but this one is purely about different things that I will choose not to take photos of. And that's quite important because you need to have that justification of taking the photo when you take the photo. You can't just go around taking photos of anyone and anything because you think it'll make a good image, because there are some things that your morals need to come into account for. And that's what I'm going to be talking about. So, the first thing, and sort of a summary of this whole thing, is imagine you've taken that photo and you had to go and show that person afterwards. Not that you need to at all, but imagine that you did. Would that person be happy with the photo that you just taken of them? So, if they're looking like they're enjoying a pleasant moment and you've captured them well or something like that, perfect. They probably will like it. But if you're capturing them during a moment of distress, whether they're experiencing a bad time in their life or they're picking their nose even or doing something silly like that, sure, it may make for a humorous image, but should it be right to take a photo of someone in that moment? And after thinking about that, your morals should come into play, and you should probably either delete the photo or just not take it if you haven't already. That's my thought on it anyway, as a summary. But there are tons of other things that I choose maybe not to take a photo of unless there's distinct reasons for doing so. That is one of them. Someone in distress, someone looking down on their luck, or homeless people in general. In big cities, homeless is a big problem, so I choose not to take photos of any of that if I can help it. There has been times where I've taken photos of a homeless person before and not realized until after I took the picture, and it's become quite confrontational, but the situation has mellowed out after explaining the situation. You're going to want to try and avoid taking photos of people that are down on their luck, and someone, especially if they notice you taking the photo, because they're not going to want that photo taken and they're more likely to come across confrontational than someone that is just won the lottery or just won a scratch card or something like that, because you're capturing people at different times in their life. You're capturing some people happy, some people sad. That is the nature of the beast with street photography. But I choose to avoid homeless people in general when I'm taking photos if I can help it. And I choose to avoid people that look like they're having a bad time. In my street photography anyway, I tend to focus more on shape, shadow, and the scene rather than the subject. And that creates tons of different possibilities for me. I can create a lot of my subjects being silhouettes, or they're off into the distance for a perspective of scale, and you can't really see detailed features or make out the person entirely. There are others where I don't, and I do focus more on the subject, but primarily I use the scene first and use the human element of the subject being just a part of the whole overall scene. That allows a lot of anonymity between anything that I'm doing, so you can't really identify the subject straight away. And it allows me to be a lot more vague and a lot more mysterious with who I tend to use as my subject. A lot of people might say that that's not true street photography, because back in the day it was all about capturing the subject in their everyday surroundings. But hey, I like these pretty pictures, and I like being a little bit different from the norm occasionally. So yeah, a lot of that helps me, but I still tend to avoid those people that are down on their luck or homeless or anything like that, just to create a whole happier atmosphere and a whole happier time when taking photos. Another thing which I have talked about before is children. I just don't do it. I think it's not right at all. Taking photos of someone else's kids is just not something I tend to do. A lot of people do because you're capturing the essence of childhood humor or play or something like that. I just tend to avoid it. I think it's weird, in my opinion. Others that I know do so, and all power to them, but I just don't like it. Unless you cannot make out. Again, I'll go back to the anonymity of my photos. If you could not make out who they are and they're just a silhouette off into the distance, and it might be a mother and child, like this photo that I took in Paris, walking through an archway, you can't identify them at all, that's okay. Or they're facing away from you in this picture that I took in a recent video. You can't identify that child. They are children, but you can't identify them. And that's important. I just don't like the whole idea of going up to, especially if you're in close proximity, taking photos of someone else's children. It just rubs me the wrong way. And if I was that parent, I would get a bit het up about it, that's for sure. There are also a lot of different people, and this goes back to people down on their luck or capturing people when you shouldn't. I tend not to capture people late at night if it looks obviously creepy. And this sounds very vague, and I will try and explain it the best I can. But if you are capturing a scene down a narrow, tight alleyway because there is a lovely light that is, shining in the distance and it lights the scene really well, I will tend to look less obvious that I'm trying to take a photo of someone, especially if they are women at night on their own or anything like that, because I don't want to come across and put them in an uncomfortable position. I just don't want that. Overall, I want to make someone as comfortable or oblivious to the fact that I'm taking their photo as possible, because it just comes across as a whole better experience for both parties. So if there is a woman coming home from a work party or something at a night out and she's walking through these places on her own, I won't have my camera here, I'll have it here, and I'll tend not to follow them anywhere. I will camp the scene and wait. Either that will be the good subject and I'll capture them from a distance inconspicuously, or I will wait for another subject and see how it turns out. I don't tend to follow people, anyone really, if it's in a very quiet area, because again, uncomfortableness and all that, we don't want that for our subjects, and I don't want to come across creepy in any way. So I tend to avoid all of that entirely. Some people, will hunt, so they will go around hunting for the subjects and they might follow someone that they see that looks nice to get them in their right frame. That's fine to an extent. If you're following them for a while and they're on their own, anyone, not just women or anything like I mentioned as an example, but anyone, if you're following them for a while and they notice that you're following them, i.e. you're quite close behind them, it's gonna put them off and make them feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I try to avoid that, because if it was me, I wouldn't like it, And I think as a whole, that's what it comes down to. If it was you, would you feel comfortable in that situation? Which leads me perfectly onto my next point. There is an American street photographer called Bruce Gilden, and he is known and quite famous for his flash photography.
1 second, underway.
And it's quite off-putting to me as a photographer. I don't understand it. And sure, there's an art form to it, and there is a cult following of people that like him. He's a very famous photographer. He's been doing it for years, but I don't like it. Going up, say, 30 centimeters from someone's face with a bright flash attached to the camera and just whipping up the camera and walking on, capturing people, unflatteringly and out of the blue, shocking them. I don't want to even attempt to do that, because it's not my style and I don't think it's very nice. I've seen it a few times where wannabe photographers like that, with that style, are walking around Soho at night, capturing people with their flash, disorientating the public and being quite, obtrusive with their shots. People eating at restaurants and coming up literally to their table with a big flash on their camera and flashing it in people's faces and walking off. Completely disturbing a scene for one, but making it, very uncomfortable for the subject. So I don't do that. That's pretty obvious by my style of photography if you've seen it anyway, but I will never do that. I just don't think it's a bit of me. I know plenty of people that will try and attempt it because they're still finding their feet with the genre, but I try and avoid it entirely because I don't think it's very nice. And again, if it was me, it would rub me up the complete wrong way and probably get me into a confrontational position, and I wouldn't want that. And as a photographer, let alone as a subject. So, yeah, I don't do that at all. And safety is very important. I've made this point very clear in videos about confrontation and videos about keeping your camera gear safe. And a lot of people have actually disagreed with my point of trying to diffuse a situation, or with the stopping a thief from nicking your stuff, trying to diffuse a confrontation. People think that I should fight back because my camera gear is worth that and all that sort of stuff. But I don't agree with that because my life is more important than insured camera gear. I don't want to get into a fight and risk it because people are unpredictable. Sidestep, but safety is important. And safety of you should be your number one priority when taking photos, not the safety of your equipment, but that should come into it, which is why I tend to be very cautious about photographing drunk people. Not just, tipsy, had a few, merry people. I'm talking about people that I've had way too many sort of slung out the pub sort of drunk, because they're even more unpredictable than the normal public in candid photos. So I try to be very, very discreet if I'm taking photos of anyone around a pub late at night after people are very loud and very merry, because you don't know how they're going to react. It's usually quite positive. And I usually have people, once they notice the camera when I'm taking photos nearby, gesture me over for a less candid moment with the photograph. That's great. But there are the very minute few that won't be like that. So I tend to, come across very discreet or not take the photos until someone approaches me first, because you don't want to risk anything happening to you or your camera gear, and putting steps in place that can avoid that happening should be a priority when you're going out taking photos. The next thing, and my final main point, will be political protests, rallies, and riots. A lot of people, especially those that shoot documentarian style street photography, will find themselves in their element at these events. I've even been asked to take photos of political events in my area and further afield for the parties themselves, and I've refused because it's not something that I want to get involved in. Now, sure, I have taken photos at protests and stuff like that in the past, but that is because they have stumbled upon me by chance, and as I have had to walk through them to get to my next destination, I would snap a photo as I go. I certainly don't join these events and take photos of them as a whole, safety being the number one concern of that, and not to come across bias to either side, I think, is another, because everyone has different views. I tend to not let my views cloud my street photography style at all, because I make my photos for not only myself, but for the people that want to look at them and the people that enjoy looking at them. Everyone has different views, and everyone should be able to appreciate everyone else's views, but I don't want to cloud my street photography with views that others might not agree with, because not everyone's the same and not everyone's understanding in that respect. So I tend to avoid it if I can. If I do take photos of an event, it will be either abstract or not containing, a mass population. Certainly not anyone that's getting aggressive or anyone that is overly passionate. It would be, the minute details. People maybe with hands behind their backs, when people are just standing around or something. So you might not be able to tell it was a political event. Like I say, I have done it through walking through them, walking around London and not expecting it to be there. And it's been okay, but I tend to avoid it if possible because I don't really want to get hurt, for one. I don't want my camera gear to get damaged. And yeah, I don't want to get mixed up in one view when I can capture both sides, sort of thing, and I can appreciate people's views from both sides. So, as a whole, that's pretty much it. If I can summarize it, it's very simple. And it comes down to legality and morality. Street photography, anywhere you go, in most places in the world, is legal for you to take photos anywhere in a public place. Whether you should do it or not is a different thing. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's right. And that's what you got to think about. And that's what I think about a lot, especially lately. As I was starting out and stuff like that, I didn't really think I really wanted to get photos. I was trying different styles, trying to find my niche. Now I found it's very easy for me to identify, should I take that photo or not? Some things have stuck with me all the way through. Some things I'm adding to as I go. My opinions change, my views change, my my confidence levels change. That happens over time, but these are the predominantly of the rules that I stick by, and that's pretty much it. So let me know your views and your morals and your things that you tend not to take photos of down below in the comments, whether you're a street photographer or not. Do you think what I said is correct? Do you agree with it? Who knows? I'd like to find out though, so let me know down below in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Again, thank you all for your support on the channel and the Instagram so far. If you want to buy a zine, there's still a few copies left, so hit up the description and get a hold of them before it's too late. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.